Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Children's Services Overview Scrutiny Committee on the 19th of March 2024. Just before we start, just ask Democratic Service Officer to read out the housekeeping notes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way down to the surface car park at the front of the annex. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Bull, Councillor Peter Cooper, Councillor Philip Broadhead and Peter Martin.
Thank you. And do we have any substitute members?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Kate Salmon is substituting for Councillor Bull, and Councillor Canavan is substituting for Councillor Cooper, and Councillor Beasley is substituting for Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you and welcome, and thank you for substituting this evening. Do we have any declarations of interest from our committee members, please? Councillor Salmon.
Yes, I have to declare an interest regarding the send item as item 8, but I have a dispensation. It's related to a member of my family.
Thank you. And just for transparency, I have a member of family who's in receipt of an EHCP with BCP Council. So next item agenda is confirmation of minutes. Before we go to signing them off, does anyone have anything they'd like to say about them? If you just bear with me, there was something that I wanted to consider. So at the bottom of page 10, it says in response to a query regarding the legality of a decision. I was just going to ask for a little bit more information because there was a specific legal query around the public sector equality duty, Brown principles, consultation, meaningful due regard. So I was going to propose that we ask for that to be inserted.
Sorry, where are you looking, Chair? I can't. Page 10, did you say?
Page 10 of the minutes for the 3rd of January. So it's got 4 at the top of the page, but it's 10 on our mod.gov. And so the bullet point, which is 3rd from the bottom.
Sorry, just my own understanding. Which bullet point was it that you weren't happy with, and what was
this?
Was the change that was?
So it's in response to a query regarding the legality of the decision, and actually it was a specific legal query around public sector equality duty, Brown principles, consultation, and meaningful due regard. And I was going to ask for that to be included.
Chair.
Is everyone happy with that?
I mean, I would. Are those from the video? Are those from the recording? I'm just slightly concerned that that I would want to have a look at this specific words from the video rather than has it been. I don't know because I haven't seen it, so it's really I haven't looked over it in depth.
It's fine. So I did ask for the specific wording to go in, right. And I was advised that we can't put them in verbatim. So those were the areas that were raised via the case law that was highlighted at that point. Okay.
Yeah, just to answer the councillor's query. So the chair had raised some queries with us around the minutes. We have made some minor amendments to them, but we would not usually include verbatim elements from the transcript. So the minutes as they stand provide a summary of the discussion that has happened, and that is the aim that we look to achieve with the minutes. So either the committee can vote to agree on a specific form of wording to be amended in the minutes as the chair has suggested. Move and second and vote on that tonight, or if there is a general steer from the committee that you want the minutes to be enhanced further in that area, we can take those concerns away and the minutes can be provided back to a future meeting.
Councillor Moriarty.
Thank you, Chair. Not understanding these things terribly well. The norm is to leave them as kind of paraphrases as opposed to specific. I'm quite happy with the wording as is then. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on that? No. So if anyone doesn't want them changed, could they just let me know now, or otherwise I can get it proposed and seconded and go for a vote on that one.
I'm just a bit, if that, I'm just a bit confused. I would have rather have had some warning as to what what's going on. If it's gone to the officers to then change something now that it is not usually, would not usually be changed. I'm just a little bit confused as to what.
Yeah. Can I ask why? What's the reason? Why would we steer away from what is the accepted norm and recommended by democratic services? I just am curious to know.
So as we go through the minutes, you'll see that sometimes there's quite a lot of brevity. So there'll be, for example, there was a discussion on waiting times, but it won't actually talk about what those waiting times were. So if someone was to come out and look at these minutes, these are the official records of this meeting. I know we have recordings, but we're only obliged to keep them on there for a minimum of 6 months. So therefore, if someone was to read them, we need to give a flavour of how that discussion went. So there was quite a lot in all of these minutes, not just on safety valve, but on some of the later discussions that we had regarding speech therapy, for example, what those changes meant. And the brevity I felt wasn't particularly helpful. If someone was to read it, they wouldn't understand what some of the work that was carrying out would look like. So those were the sort of things that I was going to ask to put them up. So as we've had advice, we can take this offline, we can go through them offline and then bring them back later. So that's one of the things that you suggested, didn't you?
Yeah, I think if there's a general steer from the committee that you are not happy with the content of the minutes, but you're not able to agree a specific form of wording tonight that you want changed, we can take your concerns away and consider them further and determine whether we need to include some more information. But I would want a clear steer from the committee on what you want us to do there. If there is a clear form of wording, as you proposed tonight, if somebody is to second that and a vote goes through, you can just amend that specific wording tonight. What we can't do tonight is agree the minutes to take away and add a bit more to, or something like that. We need to have clarity on what we're doing. But just to be clear, that the minutes are there to record the decisions made and a summary of the debate. So there will not be a fullness of all the debate. It should give a fair flavour of the meeting.
So on that then, I think I would propose that we take them offline. We go through where perhaps we can add some more information so that at least whoever's reading them, who hasn't observed any of the meetings, understands how that meeting went, what the discussion was and what those decisions were. And also I think on some of them what the basis of our decision making was as well. So I'm going to propose that we perhaps take this offline and we can send these suggested wording around for everyone to be happy with. If there's anyone to second that, please. So Councillor Martin then, thank you. And we'll do that in time for the next meeting then. Yeah.
So it'd be good to put that to the vote.
Yeah. So and on that, could we then take a vote on that, please? So anyone for? Oh, sorry, Councillor Moriarty.
Thank you. Sorry, forgive my ignorance. I'm still not fully clear. So what, at the moment we're taking it offline in order to discuss the wording. Will we have access to the video? We will.
Yeah, so there's a video and actually really helpfully there's also a transcript. There's loads of like errors because it picks it up, but the transcript's really it's a lot easier to navigate through, so you can understand what was said and where perhaps you might think actually that was quite useful, that piece, and something to explain this area here would actually add some value to the minutes. So that's what I'm proposing. If I can put those changes then out to the committee offline, and then we can discuss it that way rather than now. So that's for both. That would be for the meeting on the 3rd. So anyone in favour of that at the moment? So anyone against? Councillor Canavan.
That's carried, Chair, in relation to the 3rd of January. We will take those minutes away. You will circulate your comments on those.
Yes.
And we'll reflect on those and bring them back to a future meeting. Are the other set of minutes approved by consensus with the committee?
So the other meeting had some similar areas which I felt could probably be enhanced, and that was particularly around the speech therapy submission sort of presentation that we had. So again, I'm going to propose that we have a look at those offline. There's no obligation for anyone to agree any of these, but I just wonder if it would be helpful to have a look at those thoughts and where we can sort of enhance those minutes if required. So I'm going to propose that we do the same for the minutes for the 23rd of January. Do I have anyone to second that, please? Yes, same process.
Yes, be the second.
So Councillor Martin. So for those in favour, could I ask you to raise your hands, please? No, and anyone against? So that one's carried. So we'll get those out to you. Yeah, and I'll decide how we do that with Dem Services, and then we can have that discussion offline and then bring them back ready for the next meeting. Thank you very much. So the action sheet, does anyone have any thing that they'd like to note on the action sheet at all? I didn't have anything that I wanted to say, so I'm happy to note where we are with those actions. It's okay. And then public issues. So I'll ask Democratic Services Officer if there's any public issues for the meeting, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received 3 public questions. If I could just invite Mr. Sofianos to come up and read up his first question. They'll be answered by Councillor Burton.
Evening, everyone. Okay, so question 1. Last month, the Council was issued with a statutory direction regarding its SEND services. In its letter, the Department for Education stated, and I quote, "We expect all partners, including schools and colleges, and parent and carer groups, to work together at pace to bring about the necessary improvements." Of course, this comes at a time when the Council has been considering participation in Safety Valve, a scheme whose risks were first identified here and brought to public attention by parents. Families understand these issues better than anyone. They are the victims of every lost form, every missed deadline, every budget constraint, every service cut. Will the Council commit to fully briefing and involving parent carers in its ongoing improvement plans? And will the Council coordinate a joint discussion between officers, councillors, schools and parent carer groups and campaigners to ensure all voices are heard by all parties? Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for your question. There is an established SEND Improvement Board, which has representations from across the partnerships, including parent and carer representatives and schools. In BCP, we have two parent carer groups, Parent Carers Together, the official BCP supported group, and Parent Carer Foundation, formerly Bournemouth Parent Carer Forum. Both these parent groups attend the meetings and play a full and active part. In the written answer, I've also included links to these two parent carer groups. Would encourage interested parents to contact them and become members. The board meets every 6 weeks and receives progress against the SEND improvement plan and is chaired by an external DFE appointed SEND commissioner. The plan was co-produced with our parent care organisations and schools and continues to be adapted and changes for further improvement further improve our SEND service. The SEND improvement plan is separate from the SEND safety valve application.
Thank you. Question 2. The main report for agenda item 8 sets out some updated statistics on EHCP performance. This data is very useful, although the data set differs from previous reports, such as the Accelerated Timeliness Report published in September 2023. As the Council moves through this critical period in its improvement journey, it's essential for other stakeholders to have an up-to-date picture on how this is affecting SEND services. Could the Council therefore agree to publish a monthly data dashboard to provide a full, consistent overview of service performance statistics? And would the Council consider applying this across other areas of children's services? Thank you.
Thank you again, Adam, for your question. Yes, there is an established SEND scorecard, which has been agreed by the DFE and the SEND Improvement Board. This can be shared.
We have a third question from Ms. Beth Pearson, who's asked if I can read it out. The question is on agenda item 6, early help system. As a single parent with 2 children with extra needs, we find ourselves trapped between being too complex for early help and not eligible for CIN. It is isolating and we are left with no support. What is being done under this new plan to ensure families such as mine are not stuck between tiers of support and therefore left with nothing?
Thank you again, Adam, for reading the question, and could you also pass my thanks on to Ms. Pearson for her question. The new early help strategy and service redesign is aimed at providing greater accessibility to services. The past 18 months has been spent working with partners to ensure that services within the community are known and children and families are able to access the services they need at the time that they are needed. Enhanced provision for children with SEND will be available through the Family Hub Transformation Programme. In addition, partners will be required to improve the coordination of care planning for children with multiple and/or complex needs through the development of family network meetings. These will be multi-agency care planning meetings with families to develop the most appropriate care package available to best support children and families' needs.
So next is agenda item number 6, and we have Tracy Ryan, our Early Help and Partnership Lead, Pippa Emerson, our Service Manager and Targeted Support Youth Services Officer, to present the report. Thank you.
So thank you ever so much for allowing us to come and speak to you this evening and tell you we've been asked to come and discuss with you the work that's been happening in the last kind of 12 to 18 months and what that means in the context of the work that we've been developing. So early help as a redesign is thinking about lots of different components that make up early intervention and prevention services for children, young people and families. So first and most importantly, wanted to talk to you a little bit about what families have been telling not only us as practitioners, but also other people within other parts of the service. So they've said that they found it very difficult to sometimes navigate the support options that are available to them, and very much like the question that was posed today, that they can fall between gaps. And as a result of that, they didn't always think that support was timely enough in the context of their difficulties. Sometimes they found it really difficult to find the right service that would help them, and were often passed between services if they didn't quite meet the criteria of what was being offered. Sometimes when they were working with people, often an intervention would end at a certain point, and as a result of things not being resolved, they would be passed somewhere else. So we'd have to rehearse their story again, and that became very difficult. But what they were saying is when they got to the right service at the right time and had the right people supporting them, that work really made a significant difference to their family. So when we were talking to families around what this meant, they were often talking to us around a range of different things that they had access to, whether that was health, education, whether that was access to social care provision, housing, drug and alcohol support, etc. And what they were saying, there was a lack of coordination in being able to understand one family's full story. And as a result of that, often support felt quite fragmented. What we found is the services are really committed to being able to work smarter together for the sake of families, and that actually we have a lot of the same opinions and priorities, but actually we need to get better at how we're pulling those together. And as a result of that, we've gone through a process of diagnostic to understand what that means, not only for us as BCP, but what it also means for our families, our children, our communities, and our council of voluntary services. So thinking about early help services, at the moment they're set across two different directorates. So we've got a part of targeted support in safeguarding, and we've got something within education and skills. And as a result of that, on the left-hand side there, you'll see how they're compartmentalised and they come in under some different bits and pieces. So children's centres look at the best start for life, look at kind of pre-birth, look at midwifery and health visiting, and work with children up to 5 years old. But obviously a lot of those children might have siblings that are far older than that, but obviously that service doesn't then stretch into supporting that whole family. We've got targeted support, so packaged support for families with quite complex needs, but again, probably very close to that edge of care element. So when they may be stepping in and out of social care. We've got youth services, so targeted support for vulnerable young people that potentially come through our community intelligence, that come to us directly as a result of the centres that we operate. And then we have family information that looks to promote information to families in order to be able to get them to self-help. But there's a lack of coordination around how that was functioning. So again, the journey in navigating through that support became very difficult for families. So through the diagnostic, we did a lot of conversation about what would look and feel better. So we talked to individuals, we talked to children, young people, families and communities. We held a number of stakeholders events to try to understand what things could look like in the context of a continuous supportive journey for a child or a young person, regardless of whether they were coming into our services. And from that, we've looked at 7 family hubs. So the idea that across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, there'll be different access points where families can go with a number of different difficulties, challenges for information, advice and guidance, or potentially to access direct support that won't mean that they'll be passed between services and pit to post. And then 2 specialist youth access points, because we do recognise that young people might find it hard to walk into a family hub where there might be a focus on younger children or primary age school children, and they want their environment where they feel they can belong and they can access support within their own right as part of that adolescent journey. We're also looking more around integrating our team, so being able to deal and support a number of different difficulties or challenges or information, advice and guidance opportunities for families at different points in their journey. So whether or not it's to do with housing, whether it's to do with domestic abuse, whether it's to do with addiction, whether it's to do with family relationships, whether it's to do with where your child's going to go to school, how you're going to access childcare, the idea that there could be a one-stop shop where people could actually come and get that information again without the kind of arduous process around referral and then moving in or through services. And the idea that that's going to be 0 to 19 and up to 25, rather than have focused services for focused individuals, again, that might then stop at a certain point in somebody's journey. Looking at whole family working is an absolute priority across all of our services, understanding that what might affect one child might also affect a sibling, what might affect one parent, whether they're absent or in the home, can affect all children. So actually, when you get a holistic package of support, you're far more likely to sustain something more successful for the family as a whole. And one thing we've heard a lot post-COVID, not only in recovery, but around service rebuild, is the way people used to access services, or the times they used to access services, has changed quite considerably. So we have to be prepared to be able to flex with that. So we want to be responsive and give people opportunities in this kind of digital world, if they feel confident and competent to have online to self-help access. We want to be able to increase our outreach offer, so actually take services to people if they feel they're not able to come into the buildings or the settings or provisions that we provide. Look at mobile units. So again, potentially we can take opportunities, services and provisions directly to people in certain parts of the community if they feel, again, they can't come into our provisions. And have a look at the onus on buildings and understand that it's about a psychology of connected services and how we bring those out to people, as opposed to relying on people to come to buildings at the times that they are open. And the focus of this is looking at how our partnership can coordinate that delivery, the delivery and the way that we work more coherently, so that makes sense to families, as opposed to kind of expecting people to be able to navigate a number of different systems, a number of different pathways in order to be able to move things forward. So pictorially, that's what this looks like in the context of, you have the family in the centre of a place space. So they understand what their community means to them, and that might not necessarily be their road or their neighbour, that could be within a certain mile radius, but the idea that that accessibility, that communication, that relationship will be strengthened and increased by understanding, keeping family central to that, is really important. So what are community services doing, what are voluntary services doing, and how do we connect those services to make sure that, again, we have a really full and meaningful offer for families? What are we doing around our digitised support? You know, do we have digitised assistance? Do we have portals that people can access? And actually, what is the ICT literacy like across BCP, and how do we have to adapt the way that is communicated? Are we being as inclusive, and do we have equity and equality in order to for people to access? And friends and families, how do we maximise the skills as families and friends and connected networks as the experts in families, and grow those skills through the work that we're doing? Then we have our universal services that sit on the outside of that, and then we have our more acute and targeted services, and the idea that a family can be supported and held regardless of the level of threshold they're coming in on a singular pathway, so that actually people lean in, as opposed to kind of passing families off to individuals, and making it really difficult for families to feel that they are held. Things are improving, but people are working collectively around the difficulties and the challenges they're having. So how we've achieved that is we've brought a partnership of people together, and written an early help and partnership approach and strategy. So within that, that has a number of different areas that are looking to cover the core difficulties and challenges that we've had feedback around navigating the system of support. And within that, we have a number of different components that I'll list some for you, that help the partnership come together and work collectively. So we have things around identification. So thinking about when's the earliest opportunity to identify families. So that could be from the point of conception, and how we use information and data, for example, to understand what that family might need and start pushing those services and support out to them. It also then talks kind of more about assessment. So when families come into difficulties, how we can begin to talk to them. So rather than react to a set of behaviours or symptoms that are being presented to us as services, how can we begin to think about the underlying parts of that and respond more appropriately? We talk about teams around kind of children, families, but also within communities, so that we can understand things that are emerging and how we might be more responsive to that, so that things don't become critical and then we have to kind of react at higher level kind of acute support mechanisms. We've talked about service directories and how we need to make sure we're communicating really clearly to our communities and our families what's available to them, because what we often find is there's a wealth of resource out there, but actually people don't know how to access it. They don't know how to move through it. They potentially don't have the confidence to be able to kind of knock on the door and request that service. So what could we do in order to be able to support them to do that and feel competent, give them the tools they need to be able to be functioning in their local community. We've looked at how we can strengthen the partnership, because again, what a lot of people are saying is they're invested in working in this way. They may have worked in this way previously, but some of that has fallen aside, or actually things have evolved and the way that people are accessing services have changed quite significantly. So we've looked at the resources around a partnership team that can really help kind of push some of this and actually grow those skills within our existing networks. We've looked at what might need to happen at a locality level. So actually we can really think about how families do connect to what is local to them. And actually, if they do have to travel, what is the impact of that? And then how can we diversify services and bring things into kind of areas where potentially there is a difference in how things are delivered. And we've talked about the platform and how that can be grown. So within the strategy, we've also then created a partnership document, which allows us to understand single pathways. So rather than have lots of different referral mechanisms and journeys for families, whether they're looking for assistance around housing, whether they're looking for assistance around SEND, that actually we're going to have a set of common understanding around how we start children and young people on that journey, so that it becomes less complex and we don't have families falling into grey spaces potentially where they feel they're not getting support because they don't meet criteria A or criteria B. And we've set out a really clear implementation plan for how this strategy will be delivered across our partnership. So going back to that honeycomb of services, it's understanding individual roles and responsibilities within that and make sure that collectively people are delivering against that, and the governance structure then allows us to be able to challenge that where there are difficulties and where there are challenges. So from this, we've been focusing on some key areas of development. And that is because, again, the way that people are currently operating, it can be quite difficult for families to have to go through a number of different mechanisms in order to be able to get the support that they need. So we've looked at our assessment pathways and what we need to understand from that commonality around language, how we're identifying needs, what those level of needs constitute, again, so that we don't have families feeling like there isn't an option for them because they're not fitting into a particular box or a particular criteria. We've recognised that there's a number of workforce development areas that our workforce need to have in the context of competency, with regards to what does early help and early intervention look like, what are the pressures and the difficulties in some of our other higher tier services, that by having the right skills and the right competence we could actually help with. So whether that's, you know, child mental health, whether that's special educational needs and neurodiversity, what can we begin to grow in the context of working smarter with those services to make sure that we can offer something meaningful to families. We've also started to think considerably about the impact measures, because the challenge you have around early help and early intervention, you never know what you're mitigating until potentially you follow the longevity of that child or young person's journey. So understanding what difference can we make to the SEND agenda, the front door at children's services, what can we do around that high needs block? So we're talking very carefully to our data and analytics team around what are we doing with that. And as a result of that, we've managed to agree a single outcomes framework that will talk to 10 particular outcomes in view to be able to pick up the priorities across this particular partnership discipline. We've now agreed some joint governance and how the reporting mechanisms will work, so that we can say that against those key performance indicators across a number of different business elements, we will be continuing to kind of improve on performance. And the absolute foundation of this has been our family hub transformation work. So it's provided a really great platform for that partnership working. So build on some of the old children's centre concepts, how we then stretch those ages, take that learning, and then improve those partnerships. On to next one. And so looking at that and capitalising on that, our family hub transformation today. So we've agreed our 7 dedicated family hub sites and our youth access points. So that's not only from what communities have told us, but that's also built on data. That's us thinking about needs-led need for provision, as opposed to just what we think is right. We've looked at our virtual online offer and our self-help offer, and we've developed significantly our service directory, made that more up to date, but also kind of mapped around some of the provision that we saw was missing and how we've added that in now. We have a significant information and guidance offer. So we also have a virtual hub and we have a virtual assistant, again, that's being tried and tested with regards to kind of the child or young person's journey and how that gets them through to the right service more efficiently. We've had a huge overview of our resource and what we're looking to kind of align based on need, as opposed to kind of just have services operating as they have done over a significant period of time. And we've developed significant online programs again. So if families want to go into that virtual space, they're able to self-help based on kind of some criteria and some questions they'll be asked in view to get to the right service and the right information more quickly. We're developing our outreach program and our flexible working significantly. So where potentially there's been a lot of onus on business hours, so kind of maybe between 8:30 and 5:30, we also recognise a lot of people that potentially work, that have issues with childcare, aren't able to do that. We've not done as much work over evenings and weekends as we've wanted to do. And as a result of that, we've now kind of moved into a space now where we have evenings and weekend opportunities for our families to access services that traditionally they would have done in the week. We've extended our age range through our family hubs. So again, they've predominantly been very young children, primary age children previously, whereas now we're creating spaces and opportunities through these connections of services to stretch right up to 19 and up to 25. But what's most important in a lot of the work that we've moved forward is we really revisited that partnership. So the idea we're working with housing, probation, prison services, working with our community and voluntary sector a lot more. We've been able to really extend the kind of reach in the context of what is it this community has and what is it that we can mobilise as a result of that work. We've done that through providing some small grant funding, so encouraging our CBS colleagues to actually become part of the partnership delivery offer, as opposed to kind of like sitting on the outside of what the local authority are offering. We've got a far better infrastructure support. So we have the CAN service, so that's Community Action Network, who look to make sure that we continue to work and grow that opportunity between the local authority and CBS services. And we've obviously commissioned a number of different services as a result of gap analysis to make sure that we're really covering a full range of needs. So what you'll begin to see is we've got some agreed branding and marketing. And so not only within our family hub sites, but within our libraries, within our local schools, within our partnership of connected services and that honeycomb, you'll be able to see kind of the family hub logo and understand that that's how that partnership is working. So there's been some changes in the way that we're delivering our youth services. So 18 months to 2 years ago, we did a significant consultation exercise because post-COVID, what we found is a number of our young people who had previously been coming into our youth provisions were no longer accessing in that kind of way. And we wanted to understand what it is that young people felt that they need, but also how they wanted to access that. And through that consultation, not only with service user groups, but also with the Youth Council, who then took it out to their constituents, we had significant consultation around what is it they wanted services to look like. And what young people were telling us at that point was that, youth centres is that old kind of traditional thing they recognised. That wasn't something they were looking to necessarily use. What they wanted was more informal spaces, youth cafe type environment, where potentially you might have different services operating that they could then discreetly access if they felt the need. But what they wanted to do was actually have a space they felt that they had ownership of, as opposed to kind of the traditional youth centres we were used to. So what we've done is work very hard to have a look at our open access youth centres and then move that to our voluntary sector in the context of those positive activities and those opportunities. So we've done a number of different community asset transfers in order to make sure that young people still have the diversity of the offer, but different people within the community are delivering it. We've also done a lot to enhance our youth support office for our more vulnerable groups of young people, because again, within that feedback, that what they were saying is they can actually find it quite hard within the way that we were previously set up to want to access something more intensive. So we've changed how our vulnerable young people can be supported. We've also looked at our dedicated youth sites, recognising that young people are still wanting to feel like they have places within the community that they can access, but that is linked to the family, again, hub offer, because we want to recognise that even though the young people might want their space, we also want to be able to work where it's appropriate with families to make sure that the whole family unit remain connected. Young people also told us they liked the idea of a mobile unit, so mobile cafes they were talking to us about at the time, and the idea that we could take services and provision out to them directly. So we've developed 2 mobile units that can be far more flexible and responsive. So either young people can ask us to come to communities, we can potentially work, you know, just after school, or potentially we can work late into the evening. So our detached and responsive unit can work up till 11 o'clock at night. And we've done some work around our edge of care services. So where young people potentially are either on the edge of care or are in care, how can we support them with regards to kind of their needs, remaining connected to families where that's appropriate, or their networks. So in order to make sure that their outcomes, you know, remain positive. And we are developing a reunification service at the moment. So what young people have said is, based on that edge of care offer, if we do have to come into care, how can you support us potentially to keep those networks and those connections with home, and look to reunify us with people that are safe in our networks to do so. So we're now developing that concept and way of thinking in order to for young people to be able to either be in care and return home, or potentially be in care and then move into more independent situations. So how that's set up across BCP at the moment, I'm sorry, that's going to be really small. The screen is really small there, but the family hub sites are set in Turlingmoor, in Poole Old Town, and in Rossmore, if you want to carry off the Poole side. In the Bournemouth area, you've got Kinston and West Howe, and in Boscombe. And then in the Christchurch area, you've got Somerford. And the youth access points are in Central Poole, so kind of Poole Old Town, and also in Muscliffe. However, we've got a number of connected satellite sites as well that are dotted around the area. So, thank you so much for letting me speak. So that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And for those who haven't met Pippa before, I'm sure you'll agree she's quite amazing. It's always something very reassuring whenever Pippa speaks, and you feel like this is a real wraparound service. So thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Canavan.
Yes, a couple of questions that are linked. They were linked in the presentation, so I'll link the questions. And it's about the youth service. It says in paragraph 8.5 that maintaining a dedicated youth service is no longer within the financial scope of the council. So I'm wondering where you could point me to where the figures are that prove that. Could you show me where the figures are as to what it actually would cost to retain a dedicated youth service, and how much you actually think you are saving as a result of doing this? Because 9.4 clearly shows that you are saving money as a result of this, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. And it says our council early help service is going to save 1.1 million, and that savings will be delivered through the reduction to management staffing costs. That means fewer staff. So you're going to be employing fewer staff. And it also talks about asset transfers. Which assets are you going to transfer to which communities, and how much is that going to cost? Talks about review and recommissioning of contracts. Which contracts? So I'll be looking to see where that information is, please.
Hi, Tracy Ryan. I've just been helping and supporting the team with some mobilisation of this. So the understanding is, with budget pressures, that there was a decision as a non-statutory service that the council wanted to reduce its youth provision. That obviously is a concern to you. It was a concern to us when we were looking at the redesign work. Early help and youth services up and down the country, I work up and down the country, are always under threat because they're non-statutory. So most councils do look at these services when they're looking to make money from children's services. Work that has taken place as part of the redesign work has been to try and protect outcomes for children as much as possible. So you'll see what the redesign has actually done is not aiming to completely delete a youth service, youth workforce, but actually to retain as much as they can, but deliver services to young people in a more integrated way. So the savings is being made from across the whole early help budget portfolio, if you like, rather than reducing a dedicated youth work provision. As part of this work, we've looked at the running cost of buildings, we've looked at the running cost of all the commission contracts. The way the service is currently set up, as Pippa explains, there's a range of teams and they are working slightly in a fragmented way, as are partners. So there's a lot of duplication within the system. There's a lot of double doing. So the integrated way of working and the work with the partners that we have set out is aimed at being more efficient. There was potentially a lot of inefficiency in the system, and we've looked to reduce the inefficiency while protecting as much as possible potentially all the staff and outcomes for children. So it's a range of things across a range of areas in terms of contracts, building, staffing, etc.
With respect, that doesn't answer my question.
Do you want to answer that, or Kathy? Yeah.
No, we can come back with specific answers to those questions in terms of the financial, there isn't a financial chart in the report, but also the question was about identifying those specific assets. So there has been a lot of work that's done in that area. But just to say, to reinforce Tracy's narrative there, this was a combination. This wasn't just about youth services. There's a combination about what our delivery across the early help system was, and how we can manage that in a better, more effective and efficient way that actually delivers more across for children and families, but equally delivered services to young people in a way that they have asked to be delivered. But we can come back with those details if you so wish.
Thank you. And Councillor Canavan, can I just ask, would you like this added to the minutes as well? Because obviously it's a question that can't be answered within this forum. So obviously at some point, I'm guessing that information needs to be included. Yeah, okay, thank you. I've got Dylan next.
Hi, I've just got a question about what's it? It's a 6.5.3 on page. I can't even see page numbers. That's ridiculous. Page 6, I think it is. It's talking about the children's centres and transformation of children's centres. So it's great, you know, streamlining it, making it efficient, having 7 like bona fide centres for that development. I'm just aware of one on Christchurch High Street. I don't know if David will know as well. There's I think it's Christchurch West. There's a centre, and I don't know whether there's more of those across BCP. Just kind of wondering what would happen to those. Will they be used at all, or will they be redesigned or reallocated to different departments, that kind of thing?
I think you're referring to 27A High Street, only because I have been involved. Absolutely. So yeah, previously it was an early years setting. They had a nursery, but I'm also aware that they've had quite a significant music provision as well. That's been part of that. Yeah, absolutely. So we are looking at all assets, because again, this isn't just a decision from BCP. This is data around usage, but it's also what our partners and stakeholders are saying. And we're looking to make sure that all buildings are being used appropriately. So some will be repurposed, some potentially partnerships will be grown within them. But I'm also aware that BCP also have I don't know if it's a requirement or potentially whether it's something they're looking to do, where they are looking to sell and move on assets. But again, 27A is part of that wider discussion about what would it be best used for in the context of what the community might need.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. I just remembered it in the back of my head. I was like, oh, yeah, no, I remember 27A. Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much.
Councillor Harman.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, this seems a huge amount of work, and I reiterate what the Chair said. You've delivered that in a very clear, concise, calm way. So thank you, because it's quite a lot to get your head around, isn't it? Yeah, and I absolutely understand the why this is being done, and I understand the what. What I would love a bit more help with is the how, because what we're trying to do here, from what you've said and the document and everything, we need something that currently is very fragmented and siloed, to use a phrase we use quite a lot around here. You know, families sharing their stories several times, repetition of work, that sort of thing. I appreciate we're sort of bringing all these services in-house and physically that's happening. How are we going to ensure that those teams are talking to each other? How are we going to ensure is this through training? Is it through good management? Is it through computer systems? How are we going to ensure what we're trying to achieve by doing this is actually going to happen? And my second point to that, and I think you did touch on this as well, is you spoke about communicating this to communities. And I want to know how we're going to do that. How are we going to get out into the communities and let them know this service is there? Essentially, so lots of hows, please.
So firstly, it might be good if the chair would agree. We'll circulate the strategy and the pathways and the implementation plan with the minutes, because that will give you a lot of the first question detail in the how. And the second question around how we're going to publish it. So there's a number of launch events that profiled, aren't they, for the family hubs and partnerships that will allow that to happen. But also within the contract we have with the Community Action Network, they are taking on part of that work as well. So very similar to what's happening within SEND, we have parent carer forums, and they're part of that kind of service design. They're part of that understanding how we connect with different parts of communities, because we understand the families we know, but there are also some families we don't know. So how do we reach in to them to make sure, again, that equality of opportunity with regards to access? So hoping that answers your question with regards to, we have a number of launch events with regards to how each hub are opening, but also our Community Action Network, how they're then taking that out even deeper into the community, but also our partners. So our health visitors, our midwives, our police colleagues, our education colleagues, they're all part of the partnership launch. So again, it will be talked about in all of these different settings and provisions, because it will become a focal point in the community for families to access different types of help.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I think you saying there about sort of going out into the community, reaching beyond the parent carer forums, making sure that people understand it's there, because I think that's something historically, from what I've seen in my involvement with the council so far over the last year, I don't think we're very good at doing. I think that's really important, and I think parents and families are crying out for us to engage more and be more open and be transparent and be proactive in that as well. I did have another question regarding finances, if that's okay. So I'm trying to think whereabouts in the papers I read this, but I'll read, I've sort of copied and pasted it. So it says this programme includes 81.75 million to enable you to transform your services into a family hub model. So that, I think, was in the government document initially. So I sort of want to understand a bit like how much of that BCP are going to see. Is that an ongoing, you know, is that just a one-off investment? And then it goes on to talk about, I'm trying to think why I've put this here. I'm sure there was something to support interventions, training practitioners to support families with the HLE. So is that home learning? That it was, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry, I've taken my notes, have all gone a bit funny. But again, there was some money put aside to support with that through the family hub. And I just wanted to understand a bit more how that money is going to be used, what that looks like. Yeah, just
Yeah, I think you're quoting some of the figures in the national guidance. Yeah, so a large pot of money was made available for the transformation of family hubs through a cross-party central government arrangement. So 75 local authorities received what was called TF2, Transformation Grant 2, and they got quite a large amount of money for 2 to 3 years, in the region of sort of 2 to 3 million, depending on the size of the local authorities, and that was based on deprivation scales. So BCP didn't fall into those top 75. However, colleagues put in a bid, and BCP was awarded just short of £1 million for a 12-month project. So that 12-month project comes to end next week. So a lot of the work that you've seen that has been doing, it has been using the transformation grant that we've had. We've only had just over 12 months to define how we wanted to use that. So the new services that you're seeing that are being commissioned or via that grant, there's a certain element ring fence to capital which needs to be spent on making our environments better, that range of commission services, etc. So so that's been the partnership work for the last sort of 6 to 8 months, looking at how best we spend that work to support the wider agenda and the aims and to fill those gaps in services.
Thank you,
But
Tracy.
one off, sorry, yeah, just in the home learning.
Sorry, I've just got a couple of people just waiting as well. Thank you. But Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question then. So I am hoping that you are going to answer this as yes. So to encourage and embrace support groups such as FAB, which is Families and Babies, community support groups such as Centurions, and older children, say post 16, as in careers advice and public health.
I think from our perspective, they all sounds like the types of groups we would want to be engaged with. Absolutely, yeah.
And would there, can I just ask, would there be costs to those community groups, or would it be, here is the space, you book it for when you need it and you promote it?
I think it's a little bit too early to answer that question, if we're absolutely honest. But I think the intention is to work in partnership as much as possible, as practically as possible. Yeah. But obviously it does cost money to run buildings. It's a bit of a balance, isn't it, really, I guess? Yeah.
That's Moriarty.
Thank you, Chair. Could you speak to me about kind of what these mobile units for youth services are going to look like? Because I have a vision in my head which has a mobile bus going from one street to another for half an hour to catch the most vulnerable young people. And I can't quite envisage how that's going to support kind of, because traditional youth services depend on a trusting relationship, a building of that trusting relationship. And I think that is so important, especially now with, as our young youth member of parliament is actually doing his project on youth crime. You know, it won't really, that kind of half-hour intervention, hourly intervention is not going to develop those kind of trusting relationships needed to kind of disclose that kind of information or to build that relationship.
Well, you're not wrong when you envisage the bus. You've been on it, haven't you? So we have varying sizes. You know, one's kind of like quite significant. So most of them have tea and coffee making facilities. They have like, it's an ICT hotspot as well. They also have lots of different things that can operate from them. So we take sexual health colleagues out, and then we've taken people from schools and other positive activities. We also do some work with the kind of neighbourhood policing team as well. So we have two different ways at the moment that project's emerging. So one is where potentially, you know, a group of young people identify a particular difficulty, a risk, of vulnerability in their community, and they might want some support in kind of being a pathway for change. And so we would work with them on a project base. So it wouldn't be a half an hour intervention. It potentially could be 6 to 12 weeks intervention at a community level with those group of young people who are being the leaders in that change they want to see. But also there is another part of the project that might look a little bit more like you're saying. So it would very rarely be half an hour, in that a lot of the relationships we have already with young people are through our detached team. So they are street walkers, but that sounds horrendous. But you know, they literally walk road to road, looking to identify and make contact and have that relationship based kind of discussion with young people around, you know, why are you not accessing a positive activity? Why is it that, you know, you don't have a kind of place you can all go and hang out? And a lot of it is around, well, actually, I don't want adults around me when I do that, or potentially cost and affordability isn't for me, or actually that doesn't capture my interest. So again, it's taking the services and safety out to young people that aren't in those projects. So there will be options, and we've done it a lot already through kind of, we call it a seasonal response. So at peak times where young people might be displaced because they'll come into town, we've got the fireworks and lots of fun things going on, but they can't always access those things, and they're potentially seen as difficult or troublesome or worrying as a result of congregating meeting as large groups, we can take the bus into those environments as well and give young people a focal point and actually say, well, no, young people are our residents. They have a right to, belong and be here. So what can we provide for them as part of that? So there could be times where we're doing it only for an hour, but it will be data led or young person's voice led if we come in and do that, because we'll already have an established relationship through our detached team. So
Thank you. And could I just double check, are these qualified youth workers?
absolutely. So we do have a bit of a scale in the context of it's funny because people say they're youth workers, but actually, the traditional bit is you have to have a degree in youth and community study, and we have that. So we have staff that have that, but then we have assistant support youth workers who potentially are on their road to a qualification or potentially have a like qualification. So potentially they're educators, or they may work kind of in different psychology settings, etc. But they have a vested interest in young people. But we obviously provide full induction, full training to make sure they understand the nature and the tension of adolescence. They have training around, drugs. They have training around kind of healthy relationships, etc. And if we have partners come out with us, it tends to be from our partnership of connected services. So it will be public health or potentially, NHS Dorset, who will be coming out and delivering that, sexual health and wellbeing work. Or, again, we do stuff with our domestic abuse colleagues, etc. So yeah, they are qualified, but do also work alongside some people that are becoming qualified, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 questions, but I will try and weave 3 of them in broadly together. But my first one, I'd like to come back to the issues raised by Councillor Canavan over the financials, particularly at paragraph 9.4. Now, I listened carefully, and we're going to get something outside of the meeting coming back. But this committee is here to scrutinise what's in front of us this evening. And what's at 9.4 worries me intensely, because the budget in this current financial year is unknown in this paper, but for 24-25 it's being reduced from 5.9 to 4.8 million pounds. We're told that the council has balanced its budget into the foreseeable future, so that implies to me that if there are any other further budget reductions, they will be in that calculation, and we don't know here for this meeting this evening what amounts those might be, and we should know if we're to scrutinise this properly. But particularly at 9.4, and I hope this will come back afterwards, because that's the only time it can now, is to have a much clearer idea into what the implications are, because it talks about delivery through reduction to management staffing costs following the service redesign. Yes, of course, but it then talks, as Councillor Canavan raised earlier, repurposing of buildings and asset transfers to the voluntary sector, reducing building running costs and so on. Experience teaches me that there is a huge amount of thinking that's already gone on in this part of the paper, perhaps not here from the officers this evening, but certainly in finance, and there will be a very clear idea about how that pans out. Probably quite similar in certain ways to the strategy over the reduction in day centres, both for this coming year and subsequent years, because I recognise the wording that's in that paragraph, and it rings alarm bells to me. So the best work that's already been done by Tracy Ryan and her team may very quickly unravel and be undone by subsequent years and subsequent budget reductions, and shunting off a lot of this work to the voluntary sector. Not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it does need to have much greater transparency for us to scrutinise it properly. Shall I pause there and then come back on the other 3 afterwards?
Yeah, just to say we'll come back on those questions, because I think what we're quite rightly, it's been pointed out, it's a number of areas which feed into this particular project in terms of assets and in terms of finance and in terms of grant funding. And so we'll come back with a more in-depth detail around that.
Thank you. Can I just say to that though, so if there are any questions arising out of the information that comes back that just needs the clarity, is there scope therefore for us to come back, get some clarity, and then we have a more fuller answer that we put in the minutes? Would that be okay?
I would have to take Democratic Services advice regarding that.
Okay, I'll take that one offline. Councillor Beast, your next question.
Thank you very much, Chair. So if we go back to paragraph 2.1 in the report, I completely agree. Families tell us when they need additional help, they want to be able to find out and access services easily. Families want a seamless experience and not to be passed between agencies or left to navigate a complex range of services alone. And that was the philosophy across every service of this council, I might add. But the intention there is very good, and I believe what we've heard this evening from the senior officers involved. What concerns me is with the number of people engaged in that, we see there are over 73,000 young people aged up to 17, awful lot of people may be involved in this. What happens when that doesn't occur? What happens when people do get passed around or they don't get clarity of an answer? Not on council terms, but in terms of real life, people living difficult lives, a lot of stress, difficulties across the piece, who haven't got time to get as engaged in this as perhaps that implies. And I worry that, in fact, there isn't an escape valve, if you like, whereby there is a complaints procedure that will be quick, slick, and get to the root of the issue and resolve it. The next one is to ask about the issue of digitalisation and access through electronic means. We see in the report of the 73,300 young people aged up to age 17, almost very close to a quarter live in poverty after housing costs. And I do not believe for a moment that access through a digitalised service is going to be suitable for all of those people, let alone those who are living in poverty. They may not have access to it, they may not understand it, their parents may not actually be able to engage through that process. I can see a whole range of issues which then come back to what I was saying about paragraph 2.1. And my third or fourth question, Chair, and thank you for your indulgence, I appreciate it, is to ask where we are in the development of this service and how well we are fulfilling those objectives already, and when we think that we will have got to the point that we are looking for in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
It's not in those questions, so we'll do our best. So first of all, in terms of escalation and accountability and things not going right, early help is a partnership agenda, so we are reliant on building those partnerships and bringing partners together and then doing what we can to hold them together. So that's why an awful lot of effort has gone into this year, is bringing the partnerships together to design the new systems and the new procedures and the new pathways, so that it's not something the council is doing and imposing on partners, it's bringing them on board in terms of ownership. And certainly within those partnerships, monitoring arrangements going forward, having a monitoring arrangement and a performance arrangement, so at least we can, as best we are able to with partners, hold everybody to account to make sure we're monitoring how people are engaging or not engaging. So, but it is really difficult. Early help is not a statutory responsibility. It does to some degree work on effective partnerships and joint working, but certainly anything we can bring to that agenda in terms of holding people to account, we would do. Digital transformation, there has been some work gone on, certainly around the decisions around our family hub locations around digital access, and many parts of the communities that don't have good digital access. So that has been one of the considerations that we've looked at. But in addition to that, I wouldn't see digital as the only way to access service. It's one of the many ways to access the service. And what we do know is we get a lot of routine inquiries and footfall and demand for services that potentially could be met through a self-help offer, and a lot of our families want or would prefer a self-help offer. So that's really the focus of some of the digital access. It's to give people more choice in how they access services, not that it'll be the only way.
And if you don't mind me commenting as well, as part of that kind of digital, sorry. No, so, don't mind me commenting, as part of that digital discussion, we looked at kind of digital literacy across BCP, but we also looked at where there were kind of issues around kind of connectivity to understand actually where we're going to have pockets, because we wanted to make sure that there was opportunities, as you say, alongside how other services could be accessed. But again, that's part of the partnership roles and responsibility we've talked about. So actually, when you have kind of schools, you have different kind of community centres, you have our detached outreach team, also providing platforms for that. If there are kind of difficulties in particular homes, again, we're looking to try and take the digital offer, if that is what is needed, to families where there is challenges, as well as give them a range of different options in being able to access. But sorry, I just wanted to
that's fine,
because that's part of the study.
So yeah, digital is part of, as I say, a suite of offer and choice, really, just so we can reach out further and allow people more choice in how they access. How well are we doing with the implementation? So we're just coming towards the end of a 12-16 month period of mobilisation. So let's understand the problem. Let's understand what we're doing really good and what we want to continue doing and celebrate and protect the strengths. But what needed improvement. So that's taken some time. We've now mobilised the strategy, the partners, the resources, fill the gaps in the service. So we keep saying we've built the foundations of the house that we want to build. So now it's time to start building the house. The strategy gives us a blueprint for that. You'll notice it's a 2-year strategy. So I think we'll start to see things, people should start to see a significant change very shortly, and then hopefully have a bit more of a tumble effect. But ultimately, you know, it's going to take the next 12 months to 2 years before we're feeling this is really working the way, because it really is a major cultural shift to get partners all to align and to work in one way. So foundations are in, but you know, still quite a significant amount of work to do, I would say.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
And just lots of my questions have been already answered. I want to reiterate what a huge piece of work this is, and how incredible it is. What I would like to make a suggestion as well as a question is that it is a huge piece of work, and I think just in this evening we are never going to be able to fully scrutinise all of it. And I'm aware we have lots of meetings. I'd like to suggest, Chair, if possible, that we perhaps had a task and finish or a working party or a subcommittee that was specifically aimed at this, because I know it's a national ongoing project. I'd be hugely interested in being a part of that. I think formally in July we visited the 333 hub, which is different. I imagine councillors would really be interested in, if we were allowed to, coming and looking at one of the hubs and understanding it further and working in a partnership with you. You know, I know there were 12 initial pilot schemes that happened, and I think I say this every time something's introduced. Do we have a partner? Are we looking at a borough or an LA with a similar demographic, you know, and how that's working? Looking into some of the research, you know, boroughs that are LAs that are working the best are identifying their most at need. I mean, Salford, I think, really work with their Jewish community because they're the, you know, that's a big community there. I know we have a high asylum seeker community here that we need to access, traveller community as well. So for me, I feel that tonight's not enough, and that I really think a subcommittee or a working party would be something that as a committee would be really good to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before Lindsay comes in, I agree, because I think there are still some gaps within the report of us understanding implications. Like, for example, we talked about Christchurch earlier, but it's also on the asset sale list. So bringing in what Councillor Beasley has said and Councillor Canavan, there's some decisions that are potentially already being made that perhaps aren't reflected in this document. So it's something that I would welcome. But Lindsay, over to you.
Yeah, just to advise on process. So I think it would be just helpful to get a steer from the rest of the committee on whether they would welcome a working group along those lines tonight. But then what we do is go away and work up a more detailed scope on how the working group would approach things.
So there's a general consensus on that. We'll take it offline and see what the scope is and what it is that we're going to achieve from that. Okay, brilliant. So that's okay. Thank you. Just before we wrap up, I have just a couple of questions, if that's okay. So it is 6.3 at the very top of page 53, where it says about too many referrals or statutory assessments. Is that section 17 requests or section 47 ones that we're talking about?
It's across the piece in that it's predominantly section 17. So what we find with section 17, so children in need, it's a voluntary assessment where you have to have agreement with the family and the people concerned in order to be able to offer assessment and intervention, and as is early help and early intervention. And families have responded very positively when that's been offered with kind of the right support and the right specialism around those particular things. But also, there's been some concern around section 47 as well for BCP, and understanding what is it we can do earlier in order to be able to avert levels of crisis. And again, answering to some of the questions that were raised or responded to in the paper around that kind of efficiency. There not being gaps for families, them being able to access things in a more timely way. We're looking how we can positively impact that for our services and our colleagues across all of children's.
Thank you. So just to understand, section 17 is obviously parents or families or carers can request as well if they feel that there's some support that's needed. With that, then obviously we're introducing a graduated response. It hasn't worked very well within the SEND system. There are reports that apparently you need 2 years worth of graduated response before we can, start applying for needs assessments, etc. So those statutory requests of a section 17 request will not be affected, I'm guessing, just because we've included numerous examples, or sorry, references to graduated response within this document. Is that correct?
That's correct. If a family requests a section 17 assessment and they see that as meeting their needs, and also the service think actually it's the best possible support pathway for the family, it won't be adversely affected by the graduated.
Thank you. And then this is again back in the financial summaries, 9.1, where it says the analysis of every £1 spent on early help provision saves £3 on higher cost services. And I'm an absolute advocate of early intervention to get that supporting, because sometimes you can nip any behaviours or any difficulties in that bud. What I want to try and establish, because I do have a little niggle at the back of my mind, that's a lot of this paper could be motivated by cutting costs as a motivation rather than, or perhaps the primary need isn't always about the family. So what the reassurance I'm looking for is to agree that what £1 that you're spending isn't a means of gatekeeping and stopping access to escalation to the more statutory support. And so we absolutely will, where appropriate, I know it costs a lot more money, will escalate to statutory report, and they won't be going round and round in early help on this graduated response system.
We can offer you that reassurance. So that particular piece of information, again, because we've used the analysis tool that's been provided nationally, this was based on information on the number of requests that came through to early help and targeted support within this financial year. And as a result of providing the intervention we were able to provide and the differences we were making to families and children and young people's outcomes, we then saved that in higher tier services because those families didn't escalate, and kind of to support that further. So we have a supporting families initiative where we have to not only use a grant in order to be able to target our services, but also again get a payment by result when we successfully sustain families outcomes for 12 months or more. And we have a 10-year positive track record in being able to do that within the margins of success that BCP have been given for the number of families they would have to attach and have to demonstrate successful outcomes for. So it's not about a kind of cost saving exercise, but we do recognise that to intervene early is far more emotionally better for families, because actually the more their needs escalate or the more difficult they find to navigate services, the more emotionally costly it becomes for them. So we understand the language is a balance, but equally it's not meant to be intervening in a way that then stops them getting to the right service at the right time. It's making sure that the right service is available sooner, that might then prevent them having to go onto those more difficult and challenging pathways.
Thank you. And I have what I'm well aware, I'm 5 minutes over my own timekeeping already. It's going to be a question around the ILAC, which I know we're due at any point. Is that, Kathy, because I think it's going to be one for you, will that be more appropriate for me to raise it in agenda item 7, or do you want me to mention it now?
Difficult to say if I don't know what your question is.
If I ask it now, so what I'm trying to understand is some of the very first reports, and I appreciate you weren't with the council at that point, talked about timeliness of statutory help, and that's where the graduated response bit starts to concern me, and the varying application of thresholds in response to needs. And that's something that schools have said, that perhaps the threshold for statutory services is just too high, we're just not doing enough early enough. What I'm trying to understand, knowing that we have an ILAC sort of bearing down on us quite rapidly, is this is great. Is it enough in time for the ILAC? Will we've got some measurables in time for that? Or is it enough with the offset inspectors to say, let you know what, don't worry, we have a plan. Here's our plan. Is that how they judge it? I'm just trying to understand how this feeds into an ILAC in a positive way.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right in terms of that ILAC in 2021 in the December, there was some real fragility around the front door, wasn't there, in terms of that. So this goes some way into managing that very early help in statutory services. And then obviously there is another component in terms of how we were delivering our services at our front door at that time back in 2021. Obviously, I think the conversation later about the monitoring visits will enable you to have a more of an understanding of what happens, because obviously Ofsted have been back for their first monitoring visit to the front door back in June 22, and obviously MV6 was done back at the front door, and so there is some tangible movements within that narrative as we've gone from 2021 to where we are now.
So is it okay to weave some of my question into your presentation for agenda item 7 to answer?
There's an agenda item for MV5 that will be presented, and then MV6 will obviously not be open forum. It will be because we haven't received a letter, and so they've okay.
Thank you. So I'm going to just close it there. And the recommendations is for information and scrutiny. There's no recommendations that have come forward from the panel. Sorry, Councillor McRae.
Sorry, I'd just like to come in and just say we welcome the scrutiny that this has been given. I'd also like to say that we've shared it with the Integrated Care Board, and they were very impressed with this work, and they're very excited about how they can work with us and work with their kind of neighbourhood and their place shaping against this. And so they've been delighted in that. We also had Andrea Lepson, MP, also visit one of our family hubs, and she said it was one of the best hubs she's ever visited. So I very much welcome you to come and visit. There's more work to do, but it absolutely was a space that we could get into, and I'd like to congratulate the officers because they have done a phenomenal amount of work to get to where we are. More to do, as I say. Yeah.
So we don't have any recommendations, but perhaps for action is that the officers invite councillors out to see the hubs, if that's okay. Thank you. Everyone in agreement with that? Cool. Thank you. Right, I'm going to move on, and so agenda item number 7, the Children's Services Improvement Monitoring Report visit 5 and 6. We've got Kathy and Rachel presenting this. Of course, the letters for number 5, monitoring visit 5, has been published. We've not received 6 yet, and that if we wish to speak to that, and there is a presentation that's been prepared, we would have to go below the line because that's not yet out in the public domain. So we'll hear about number 5 and then come on to 6 and deal with that if that's later.
Absolutely, I will start, and then I think Nicole, the Director of Children in Care and Care Experience, will pick up from the presentation. But just to remind everybody, as we just talked about, the ILAC in December 21 rated inadequate. And so part of the Ofsted structure and inspection methodology is to come back and do a number of monitoring visits, which basically a deep dive into particular areas over a period of time. And when they are satisfied that we've reached a certain level of performance and they are happy, they will consider about coming back to do a full ILAC very shortly after. So we're now in a position we report on MV5 at this point. So MV5 was against care experience, and the kind of question was is what are we doing better for our young people, and are they getting a consistent service? And I'll let Nicole pick up from there.
Thank you, Kathy. So just to say that the monitoring visit came and looked at our support for care leavers, which is the statutory language, but our young people in BCP have told us that they want us to use the language of care experienced young people, and so that's why you'll see the different language in the presentation and when we talk about our young people. So focusing on that question of what's better for our children and young people now, and are our services more consistent when they're leaving our care? So some headlines that were pulled out. So reassuring for us is that we know ourselves well, and we were able to talk to where we thought our opportunities for doing things in a different way would be, and celebrate the things that we knew were improving. There was a new and capable management team that was being established within the service. Inspectors could see a commitment to the improvement journey within the service, although not yet good enough, and we needed to pick up some more pace. Inspectors acknowledged our financial pressures within the council, but also were really clear that we still needed to improve. And again, pace was one of the words they used there as well. Housing was a key feature that was picked out as a headline. So accommodation had been a concern for our care experienced young people when the last ILAC took place. And they found that accommodation, while still a national and local challenge, there were some concerns about the quality and how quickly our young people received housing. The corporate support across the whole council they felt was an area that we could strengthen. Again, pace was mentioned. You'll see a common theme. Most young people benefited from positive relationships with their personal advisors, which is fantastic, and that support for our young people wasn't quite yet consistently timely. So looking at our progress, there were three capable and stable team managers in the service starting to make positive impact, and we'd had a really clear focus on recruitment and retention, which was starting to make a difference. There were good initiatives seen from the care experienced young people's service. So one of the things they mentioned, and members mentioned this earlier, was around 333. They felt that was a really positive, warm and inclusive place for our care experienced young people to come and access. There was a range of professionals that they could come along and meet there. So, for instance, independent advocates, education officers, we have some health representatives, housing representatives that are also available at that site. There is a football team that's been set up for our unaccompanied young people, and that was picked out as an exemplar of best practice around helping them really develop friendships and relationships, integrate into their local communities, and really start to develop pride in themselves and their capabilities. Most young people had up-to-date plans with aspirations, but that wasn't yet seen across the board for all of our young people, though inspectors could see that the team managers were focusing on that as part of our improvement. We had the right young people open to the service, and we were using our extended offer more appropriately. So that's for our care experienced young people who are 21 to 25, who don't necessarily need the regular support of a named personal advisor,
but are still kept open via extended offer, and they can come back and call in at duty anytime if they need some one-off support or advice. They can still come and access 333, but it's a little bit more of an independent life for them. Team managers were working collaboratively to implement the action plans and our improvement that was needed. PAs were well supported, but the impact wasn't quite yet translating through for our young people, and that supervision was meaningful and reflective, but we needed to improve making sure that all young people had case supervision recorded on their files in a consistent and timely manner. Some of our areas highlighted for improvement was around our allocation of personal advisors. So at the time that the inspectors came in, we knew that we had some challenges in this area, and we weren't allocating to our children in care at an early enough point. And we were far too close to them turning 18 and transferring across to the care experienced young people service when we were allocating PAs. I'm really pleased to update that since this has been published and we've had the inspection, it's now a fully staffed service with permanent employees, and we have a named PA for all of our children in care age 17. And by the end of this month, we will have a named PA for all of our children in care age 16, which is huge progress from where we were even just a few months ago. Due to that untimely handover, our young people weren't all getting consistent handover visits with their social workers or the professional who knew them best to their receiving personal advisor. Professional curiosity wasn't always demonstrated in all cases, and we felt that some of that challenge was around things like when our young people were going missing, our personal advisors weren't always being really proactive and tenacious in keeping on top of trying to make contact, trying to go out and find out where they were. So that's something that we've also been working on. There was concern raised around our visiting for unaccompanied asylum seekers who were placed in the local area by the Home Office in hotel provision, assessed as adults by the Home Office, but then presenting to children's services and saying, actually, I'm a child and I need support. And so we've also addressed that, and we have a duty system in place to make sure that a social worker goes out in a timely manner to see those individuals. Young people with mental health needs were waiting far too long for the right supports, which we know is an ongoing concern. And inspectors felt that the local offer for our care experienced young people was difficult to understand, and that some of our young people might be disadvantaged by some of the content of our local offer, but they were reassured that that was being addressed. And so also just to update on that point, that the local offer is under review, it is being worked on, and our aim is that we will have a revised local offer, which will have been updated in collaboration with our care experienced young people and some of our older children in care, ready for October this year, which would coincide with National Care Leavers Week as well, so that can be really celebrated. So thinking about the quality of practice, inspectors noted that PLRs, so our practice learning reviews, our audit mechanism, were completed on a regular basis, and they gave insight into the lives of our young people and work that was taking place, although there was still some work to do around closing the loop on the actions that were highlighted in those learning reviews. Caseloads were being overseen by senior leaders, and they had reduced significantly since the ILACs. So to give you a bit of a flavour of where we're at the moment, the average caseload for a personal advisor, so the average number of allocated young people is currently 18, and the maximum number of allocated young people for our experienced workers is currently 25. There was a small number of young people in unsuitable housing that wasn't meeting need, and joint housing assessments weren't being completed in a timely way. We know that's still an area that we need to work on, and that is having focus at the moment. But our joint housing protocol has now been launched. That was launched just before the inspectors came in towards the end of last year, and that's making sure that all of our children in care, as soon as they turn 17, are referred to colleagues in housing, and we work together to make sure they have a joint housing assessment completed well before they turn 18, and we have a clear idea of what their planned accommodation pathway will look like, not just their next step, but actually a pathway through to their independent living, and what support they might need around that to achieve that.
PAs had reported that they had access to training, but some didn't quite have the right knowledge in all of the areas and experience to support young people effectively. So to give that some context, as part of our recruitment focus, we had actively targeted our adverts at trying to seek people to come and join the service that had experience in other areas. So may not necessarily have been a personal advisor before or worked with care leavers before, but potentially might have worked in the justice system or in the education system or the health system, or had volunteered or mentored in the local community and would have those skills that they could bring with them into the post to get a much wider range of skills and experience to support our different young people. And where there was experience, and so some of our more experienced personal advisors in the service, inspectors felt that they did effectively support young people and also their peers. So as summary, inspectors said that they could see progress since we'd had our full ILAC inspection in December 21. They were very clear that children's services wouldn't be able to make all the improvements we need on our own, and that we really need to be working with our corporate and partner agencies to get everybody on the same page, working more collaboratively towards the same goals, and with pace, the word that they mentioned several times. And that there were some gaps in knowledge, but they felt that the team was very willing, and they said we had the right ingredients to drive the improvements forward.
Thank you. Anyone else or open to questions? So, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much for that really comprehensive overview of the letter. The one bit that kind of, as you look through the previous letters and the progress we've made, is this professional curiosity that is something that caught my attention really. And I understand the pressures and the challenges that we've got in terms of what I'm about to say. But when we look at when it references the earliest stage, the importance of making relationships with PAs, the consistency around the professional curiosity and the impact that has on potential progress that's made, etc. And it also references to missed opportunities such as capturing the views of children, young people and partners, etc. So how do you think we can get better, improve professional curiosity without having to add, even if we just add a smidgen of that under the pressures that we're under, to just make subtle differences that can be quite easily tangible in just caring a little bit more to ask a few extra questions in maybe a limited time that we have with young people?
Thank you. I think that's a really timely question, actually, because we know that professional curiosity has been a bit of a tough nut to crack in recent visits, but it is something that has maintained focus, certainly for the leadership team, and it's about modelling the expectations. I think giving people the permission to take time to sit back and think, and to develop that curiosity and to be supported to do so by their peers, by their colleagues, when we're working with our partner agencies as well, because we may not always necessarily be the right professional for that particular young person. They may have a really trusted and developed relationship with another professional, and can we ask those questions between those partner relationships to help fill in some of that picture? And we have also focused on making sure that managers, direct line managers, feel equipped and capable to ask those questions and support our frontline staff to be more reflective about actually what could I have done slightly differently there, or is what that young person told me actually how things happened, what else might be the situation, and really helping people to develop that through the prompts. We've been quite keen in the service to try and avoid having kind of mandatory training around that, and try and develop those live skills through those peer discussions and through those supervision discussions and that modelling to try and support that development. And I think that's a piece across children's services that is the part of our focus of our work and our improvement journey.
Yeah, just to say it's that difference between compliance and beginning to get that quality and that real, as you see at the bottom of the presentation, we talk about stretch and looking outwards and upwards. To say we've got some really good examples of where that's done really, really well. And we have a really robust quality assurance system that really pushes us into, so we're going from that compliance to, well, actually, what does a good case look like? What does an excellent case look like? And so month on month, we're seeing a little bit more increase from where we were in 2022, early 2022, no quality assurance framework, through to quality assurance being undertaken, but it's still inadequate, to it's now inadequate and requires improvement. It's now requires improvement and good, and we're tipping into that. And so we need to demonstrate examples of where that's done really well and share that experience through training and development in terms of coaching, not in terms of blame or anything else, and doing it that way. And so we are chipping away at that, and we do have some really good examples. And when Ofsted come, they will give us cases where they have seen that and they really like it. So we've got exemplars which we then use within that quality assurance framework. But it is that different, and it will be that difference between an inadequate rating to a good rating. And so that's where we're being pushed. So
thank you. But Councillor Canavan.
Sorry, I thought Councillor Martin was in front of me, but I'll ask my question anyway. Can I ask about housing? This report, I think, acknowledges the continuing problem with housing and issues around standards, and I've raised a number of times the issue of selective licensing. If those people who are providing the housing for us are not responding in a timely way, and not even in some cases being able to alleviate crisis, then there's a big question mark about whether or not they're doing the job as an appropriate landlord. So I'm just wondering what more we can do to ensure that these joint assessments that are being undertaken actually have some results. I mean, I'm really pleased that you're seeing some improvement, because I'm not recognising it in the ward that I represent. I can assure that, or in my casework. And I'm also very grateful for your pointing in this direction of the joint housing protocol, which I wasn't aware of, but I'll seek to track down, because that partnership working is important. But as you know, Chair, within the ONS board, they've been casting out for ideas about areas for scrutiny. And I know Councillor Salmon and I have both raised the issue of housing. I have raised specifically the issue of housing standards, and the continuing concern that I have that private sector rented accommodation is not at the appropriate level it should be. And I think we might have a difference of opinion about what's suitable and what's not. So I'm just really asking about what more you feel we can do in this area.
Thank you. So I can answer in relation to the housing provision, specifically for our care experienced young people. And we probably have a little bit more control over that than potentially some of the private rented sector accommodation in the local area. So we do have a number of different provisions which are commissioned and set up specifically for our care experienced young people, and they range in from low support accommodation, high support accommodation, low support accommodation, and through to some individual training flats, depending on the needs of that young person and kind of where they are at in their transition through to independence. And those are all monitored, visited regularly by staff from both housing and personal advisors. We do our best to go and visit our young people at home and where they're living. And that's a slightly different statutory arrangement for visiting frequency depending on their age. But we aim to do that kind of at least once every 2 to 3 months ideally, so it may not be every visit, so that we can actively see where they're living and how our young people are maintaining that accommodation. There are also discussions and exploration around whether we have housing provision in the right location for all of our care experienced young people, and to make sure that we have opportunities for housing across the conurbation and that they're not just targeted in certain small areas, because we want to make sure that our young people have access to, you know, be able to get to wherever their education provision is, be able to get to their employment provision, etc., be in the local community area for where they may already have links. And there are a number of different work streams underway with our commissioning and our housing colleagues around how we can make sure that we are commissioning the right properties at the right standard in the right local area, but that we have QA and governance over those and how they're being provided. There's also been some targeted work around, so one of the things that's picked up in the ILAC was around the use at that point of houses of multiple occupancy, so HMOs. That was very much targeted, especially around support for our care experienced young people. We do still have a very small number of those that are used in certain circumstances for our young people, but there has been investment into making sure they are much more homely, they have been redecorated. We are confident that those feel like a much more positive place for our young people to be. There is much more regular visiting to check the standards of those accommodations. And we have linked those young people in those types of situation, which again are few, with something called our Always There carer scheme. So experienced foster carers who will go out and be a one-to-one link for those young people as an extra set of eyes, essentially, to help them develop those skills, make sure that they're living in appropriate standard accommodation, to try and make sure that there's a holistic approach for those young people, rather than this is where we're going to place you, and kind of leave people to get on with it. We want to really make sure that our young people have as much support around them as possible, and for us to be confident that they're in as best provision as possible that we can offer them. We know we're not there entirely for all of our young people, and we are ambitious about making sure that we are improving our sufficiency, and as I've already said, making sure we're improving where our young people can live around the conurbation. But we do know that there is still work to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Harman next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the thing I was going to sort of pick up on was something that led on from what you said, Dave, about reading through the previous reports. There was a consistent repetition of the fact that there's been an absence, of a clear and unified approach. So the idea that this is how we do it here, or you know, we've got a practice model that everyone adheres to. And so when you guys were talking about professional curiosity, it feels like that fits very much into that. You know, it's in a thing that would be embedded, isn't it, within the culture of how a team work together. And yeah, it just clearly that sort of feeds into that. Something I wanted to ask at the very end, when you were sort of summing up, you mentioned that the team were identified as being very willing to make change and implement the suggestions and what's needed. And I just wanted to ask about the morale, because obviously it's quite hard when people come in and scrutinise your work, and you know, often it puts you on the back foot a little bit, doesn't it, and defensive. So how are the team at the moment? Have we got, you know, that ambition and drive to want to make things better, and the recognition that it's a good thing to be able to evaluate your own practice? Or how are the team feeling? How are the PAs?
Yeah, absolutely. The feedback that came from the service was actually that they were really disappointed that inspectors hadn't come just a couple of months later, or weren't just coming now, because they were really well aware that the management team were just stabilising. It was at a point of transition, because I had been the service manager for the service, and I was literally about a week into stepping from that post into this post. So there was another person coming in. So they were in a period of flux there as well. And we were just right at the kind of grass shoots of starting to see that change, starting to get the permanent staff into post, getting them really well inducted, really developing that work, really starting to develop those conversations with housing. But it was all at such an early point that, yeah, absolutely, it was a little bit deflating, I think, initially, because there's a lot of commitment and a lot of hard work that goes on in the service, and it is tough to hear some of the challenges, but it wasn't anything that we didn't already know. And And yet staff did say if they just come 2 or 3 months later, we'd be in such a different place. So I took that to be really reassuring. And they are really committed and are running with trying to make the positive changes, knowing very well that we are likely to have, you know, an ILAC inspection in the coming months. They really want to make sure we can evidence that change, and particularly the management team in leading everybody through that.
Thank you, and have Councillor Moriarty next. I'm going to make that the last question because obviously we've still got monitoring visit number 6 to go through as well.
Okay, thank you. If I could make it 2 linked ones, if that's okay. And following on very much from what Emily said about staff morale, can I check with you, where are we with the levels of agency staff? Because I do wonder if you haven't got kind of commitment, long-term commitment, it's very hard to have that curiosity. And our staff, have they got enough time? It's wonderful for us and yourselves, I'm sure, to say we need staff to have curiosity. They need to have sufficient time so their casework can't be too high for them to be able to sit and reflect and have kind of meaningful supervision and stuff like that. Are we in a place where they now have a reasonable workload where they can actually start doing those things? And how are agency staffing? Because I know that's been traditionally a big issue. Thank you.
Would it be all right, Chair, if I ask Rachel to answer that question? Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. In December 2021, after we had the ILAC inspection, we saw a lot of staff exit children's services, and we went down to 30% permanent workforce. I'm pleased to say and report now that we've got 70% permanent workforce recruited. So we've had quite a campaign over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, in order to stabilise the workforce. Alongside that, we've also introduced a caseload strategy. So as part of our recruitment strategy, we could say to potential workers coming to join us, this is what work will look like for you. Working in BCP, you will have caseloads, and we give average caseloads. So you will have caseloads on average of about 16 to 18 if you work in the children and care team or wherever, because they vary across the different service. So with quite a few initiatives put in place, we've been able to recruit to our workforce really successfully compared to a lot of other local authorities. And you've got to remember, we're also in a social work recruitment crisis at the moment. We've done a lot of work with our agency staff. Our agency staff said it was a really nice place to work, and they've converted into, we've managed to convert some of those agency staff into permanent members of staff as well.
Thank you. Just before we can start to talk about monitoring visit number 6, obviously it's Social Work Week. I saw the video, so thank you. And can we just, I think, on behalf of the committee, pass on all of our thanks and thank you for their continued hard work, not just the social workers, because it is far broader than that, isn't it? So literally everybody within the team, thank you so much. There is no recommendation on this paper, but I don't know if this is an action or recommendation. And it's something that Councillor Canavan talked about, the rented sector, and of course environmental health have a huge raft of powers, 28-day notices if there are some significant challenges, difficulties, defects within a property. So I'm just wondering, because there seems to be a bit of a disconnect in the information that perhaps our people sort of moving on to their next accommodation may not know about, and an accommodation perhaps not suitable. So I think it's going to be a recommendation whereby we request that the Director of Housing liaise with the Children's Services Directorate to devise information, be it in writing or verbal presentation, about the extent of environmental health services powers and the remit to ensure that housing is of good quality and fit for habitation. Yeah, everyone okay with that? I think it's very hard, isn't it, when you're leaving the care experience and you don't have your family members looking out for you and your dad popping around with a roller and paint and, you know, perhaps tacking down some loose carpet and stuff. And if they don't know and they obviously can't get that rectified. And I like, you know, Councillor Canavan, really quite concerned about perhaps the potential of some of the accommodation that they could be living in. So if we've got these powers, then I think then we should absolutely let them know. So everyone, I need a seconder, sorry for that as well. So as a recommendation, that's what I'm proposing. Do I have a seconder? Okay. Councillor Beasley. Is there anyone in agreement with that? Yes. So is there anyone not in agreement? No, and any abstentions? No, so okay, we'll adopt that as a recommendation if that's okay. As we said, monitoring visit number 6, we've been asked to go below the line on that because it contains exempt information. And I just wondered, Kathy, you explaining the reasons for that?
The only reason is the fact that Ofsted haven't published the letter and it's embargoed. I cannot share that information. Yeah.
So that needs to be proposed. So I'm happy to propose. Anyone to second it? Councillor Beasley, and then everyone in agreement with that one? Yeah. Any against, abstentions? No. Excellent. So if we just pause the live stream for now, and then obviously I'll leave for the
Kathy's saying it's embargoed. Does that but we can still see it? Or I'm really that means generally it wouldn't be bought until it's released to everybody for councillors. It's just for officers generally. So again, this is something that's happened before. I would like some more kind of. I'm just not. I would have just liked.
confused as to why this is occurring. Janie, do you want to?
Chair, I think the report does set out that the information on MV6 will not be published and placed in the public domain until the 27th of March. We're purely highlighting that that there cannot be any public debate on MV6 and the monitoring visit 6 because the information is not yet placed into the public domain. The report, I think, is quite clear, and the agenda set out is quite clear that if members did want to ask questions of Kathy, that would have to take place in the exempt session, and Kathy could only provide a response in so far as she is able to, bearing in mind that we don't have any published details from that visit because it won't be published until the 27th. So I think it's an issue around timing of this meeting and the publication dates. So it's simply nothing more than other than being transparent about the position of why MV6 cannot be discussed in the public domain today.
Just before we move on, can I just ask one particular question? Sorry, now I'm getting confused. Is the published date the 27th or the date that you actually received the letter, the 27th of March?
So we received the letter. So we received the letter before the 27th of March, but I'm under strict embargo not to share that letter in the public domain till the 27th of March when Ofsted publish it.
So you have the letter already, or you yet to receive the letter?
Yes, I have the letter already. The letter came on the 22nd of March, but it's under embargo. Yeah.
I'm just wondering why, therefore, if we are allowed to speak about it, why the councillors can't see it in exempt session. And for some reason today in an email, I was told that you not received the letter yet, you see. So I'm just trying to understand what's going on, really. Is there any reason why councillors can't see that letter and then we can speak to it in the exempt session, therefore?
By the nature of the embargo, DFE dictate who can have access to that letter. They have not given permission for it to be circulated any widely. Breach of an embargo does have quite significant legal implications for the council, and therefore we have to adhere to the DFE's instruction that it does remain under embargo. It must not be circulated, must not be shared without their express permission. And as far as I'm aware, that express permission has not been granted.
Okay, no, that's fine. And I think it's really good to get that clarification as to where we are and what could be shared and what can't be shared, whether it's an exempt session or not exempt session. So I'm happy to propose that we go into exempt session so that we can receive the presentation on monitoring visit number 6. And I welcome the fact that you're bringing this forward to us rather than waiting until after the 27th of March. Is there a seconder for that at this moment, please? Councillor Canavan, okay. And is anyone happy to go below the line? Everyone in agreement? Is anyone against?
I'm not against, but can I just say, this is a couple of times this has happens at committee. I would really welcome being advised of this in advance of committee, like by an email, just to say. But but not the fact that okay.
I wonder if perhaps offline we have, in the olden days, you used to have white papers and yellow papers. You know, if it was yellow, then you couldn't talk about it. And obviously now it's online, we missed that. I'm wondering perhaps there's some training that we need as councillors across the board in terms of exempt, confidential, etc. Maybe offline we do that. Sorry, Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. I've already, in a different context, suggested that to the monitoring officer. She, I think, is going to take it up, but it seems to me that with so many new members of this council, it's a fundamental that really requires exact knowledge from members and indeed from officers about what can and can't be done and how it should be taken forward. Perhaps, therefore, could I suggest that an advisory note is sent from this Overview and Scrutiny Committee to the monitoring officer along those lines?
Chair, for purposes of transparency for this evening's meeting, I would like to point out that the agenda itself does have under agenda item 7 set out in bold type. Please note to set out within the report should the committee wish to discuss information relating to MV6, which is confidential, then it will need to move into an exempt session. And the report also does make reference to that as well for this particular agenda item. That in itself does satisfy the transparency rules that we have to adhere to in the publication of the agenda. I note Councillor Beasley's comments that it's already being addressed. So you can send me an advisory note, but I'm already doing it. So, and got plans in place, which I'm sure you'll all really enjoy when it gets to that moment in time. Thank you.
No, thank you. So just to confirm, as far as I understood it, there were no against or any abstentions. So we switch off the live stream, please, and try services if you won't mind just. So yeah, the recommendations we obviously all adopted for that one. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Carly.
Chairman, thank you for reminding me and the meeting. I have to leave at 8:30, which I forewarned you of.
Right, thank you. Welcome back to continuation of the Children's Services meeting on the 19th of March 2024. We're now on agenda item number 8, which is the statutory direction in relation to special educational needs and disability services, which was issued on the 26th of February 2024. So I've got Rachel Gravitt and is Sharon joining us online, or is it just yourself?
No, it's myself.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So this, as you've said, Chair, this is a report regarding the statutory direction. Just to remind everybody, in July 21, the SEND service across BCP were subject to a CQC offset inspection, which resulted in a written statement of action. And from that written statement of action, there was a co-produced improvement plan was put in place, which was signed off by the DfE and the DfE advisor at that point. This included a number of co-produced work streams to deliver the written statement of action plan and a SEND board to oversee it, which was chaired by the Local Government Association. In July 23, there was a review meeting with the DfE and NHSE, which is a regular thing that we have against the written statement of action. And it concluded that the written statement of action was not delivering and not delivering any impact and outcome for the children and families with SEND. And so at that meeting, it was decided there would be a statutory direction, which I think has been reported on here and various other places at that time. I think it may, but it has been mentioned. In a number of presentations. However, it wasn't delivered till February. Anyway, from that point in July, just for reassurance, we did not rest on our laurels. And Sharon Muldoon came in to do a diagnostic of the SEND service and the SEND plan. And so from that diagnostic, it was decided that the SEND written statement of action was not fit for purpose and we needed to revitalise the plan. We revitalised the governance around that. And our DfE advisor for children's social care also became the DfE advisor for SEND at that time. And so the statutory direction, because of the way the regulations and responsibilities lie, the statutory direction is addressed to the council. And so the statutory direction that you'll see also mentions the system partnership in which people should support the system. And I think there was some discussion about how the direction could support the system to actually all work together. And so it was delivered in February, and that's where we're at.
Wait, should you have anything to add or okay for questions? Straight to questions, anyone at the moment? Patrick Canavan.
So this report says that the Secretary of State is therefore satisfied that the Council is failing to perform to an adequate standard in some or all of the functions conferred upon the Council, etc. So I think there's a quotation in the press that this represented a vote of no confidence, which seemed fairly appropriate kind of comment, really. So I would appreciate some comment about what it is we're going to do about it. But also, I think it would be entirely, well, just nonsense not to discuss this in relation to safety valve, because you issued an email yesterday about safety valve.
Sorry,
And I'm going to press the
Patrick.
question, Chair,
No, you
because it's
can't.
just inconceivable that the public would not want us to raise a question about safety valve in this meeting.
Right, can I just ask you to stop? Okay, I've asked safety valve to be put on this agenda. It was refused. The reason that we cannot speak about it is because there are some councillors here who have not asked for dispensation, because I was told we could not speak about it in this meeting. So therefore, we would have no chair and we would have some other councillors who would have to leave. And it's completely inappropriate. Absolutely great. It should have been on the agenda. We should have had a verbal update and nothing else. But we can't talk about it because there are councillors here who've not got dispensation, and you would be putting them at risk if we go into that realm. I'm really sorry. I absolutely agree with you, but those are the rules that I've been asked to play by.
It's up to you, obviously, Chair, but if you think this isn't going to hit the press, you're really seriously mistaken.
Just, I'm not saying I disagree with you. Is there a question outside of the safety valve that you'd like to follow up? Because you made some important points at the start, and then I just wondered what questions you'd like answered.
I did ask about what we were going to do about the fact that we're failing.
So the question is regarding to the statutory direction and what is it that we're going to do about it. From the point of the statutory direction before we received it, so in the July, we undertook a diagnostic that was actually brought here by Sharon Muldoon that went through the diagnostic for the SEND service. From there, a improvement plan was devised, and that was signed off by the new SEND board, by the DFE advisor, chaired by the DFE advisor John Coughlin, and also the NHSE and also the DFE. So that has all been signed off. So against that plan, there is a lot of work that's happening against that plan. I note from the report that we have set out some meaningful progress that's already been done. I'd actually like to say that there has been improvements against that further. So as we set out in that report, we're talking about 96% of decisions proceed with assessment are made within 6 weeks. That's now at 100%. 94% of requests of educational psychologist advice receive a response within 6 weeks. That's now 100%. Our education and healthcare plans issued to children more quickly in January was 27%, were issued in 26 weeks, and in January 23 it was 0. Our 20-week figure is 65%, and an upward profile will continue, and we aim to reach 100%. So there has been significant improvement since we have revised the plan, and that we have been working against that plan. All cases are now allocated to educational psychologists, and that we're scheduling, those reports are currently scheduled to be completed by the end of May. And so against that plan, we've made significant progress. Again, once we get to that compliance, again, we would be moving into the quality of services.
I think I've got Councillor Harman next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 quick questions. Initially, I was a bit confused as to why there's such a big gap between the visit and then the publication of the report. So I just wondered if we could have a bit of clarity on, because I think that might cover some of what we've, why it feels there's been no progress, but actually
Yes.
Yeah, so the monitoring visit was in July 2023, but this letter is February 2024.
Yes. I can't specifically understand why, because obviously it was the DFE who decided with the Secretary of State that it would be delivered, and we knew that back in July. And so, but I think there was some conversations around whether the statutory direction, because it comes to the council, whether it actually could in some way encompass a statutory direction to health. But of course, that's the NHSE. So I think that deliberation may have delayed it arriving.
Okay, thank you. My second question, you sort of touched on this just then, Kathy, when you were speaking before about the meaningful progress that's been made. Yeah. I know one of the things talks about the timeliness of decision-making processes, and that 96.1% of decisions to proceed with assessment are made within 6 weeks. I know it's been raised before in this committee, and I know it's a concern of some parents and families. I just want to address, or hopefully there's reassurance that can be given here, that applications are not just being refused at the first hurdle in order to help with the figures, because I know this has been raised with me as a ward councillor. Because obviously if you just refuse it, that's an easy way to get your figures.
Yeah, absolutely. We are not in that position, and we would never want to be in that position. And in actual fact, our acceptance of EHCPs is high and continues to be high. So that is not the case. And I understand there is some scepticism about the progress that has been made. And you're not the first one to talk about maybe fudging the figures. I can 100% assure you this is about really good, robust leadership and management, and really good use of efficient and effective processes and resources that we probably weren't in that space before.
Thank you, Kathy. And I've got a final quick question, if that's okay. Thank you. Within the report, it talks again about, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it says, whilst the statutory direction is addressed to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, we expect all partners, including NHS Dorset, schools and colleges, multi-academy trusts, earlier settings and parents and carers groups to work together. And again, I know this has been raised, and it's quite a big thing for me. I know that we say that we're really good at talking to parent and carer groups and having that transparency and openness of conversation to find ways to work together to go forward so that it is done in the form it should be, with everyone involved. But I do know, again, that there are concerns with a lot of our families that the parent carer forum current setup is fragmented, it's not working. I know there's several different parent carer forums, and I suppose this is more of a statement than a question at this point, because it's something I would like to suggest for the forward plan, that we somehow look at how we could be better at doing that, because for me that is integral and it should be at the heart of everything, that communication and working together to achieve the progress we all want to be pulling in that same direction. And I think it's hard when you've got so much division happening, because at the end of the day we all want the same thing for these children and young people. And I think if we were better at communicating and more open, I just think we could be moving at greater pace. That's the thing we always come back to. So a comment just that at some point, maybe for the forward plan, that could be something. I don't quite know what that would look like, but if we could explore that, how we could be better as a council at communicating with our families. Thank you.
I think we would welcome that.
But we have email addresses for all our families, don't we? Because we send out all the annual review paperwork and what have you. And I don't know why we've never used that as a means of sending out for consultation. I understand what was said about parent care forums. I'm really loath to get into that debate. It's far more convoluted and complex than it first appears. But thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Hope to have that consultation debate, certainly. Any more questions at this moment in time? I've got one, in as much as the Send Improvement Board, because it seems to be, or almost appears to have taken the place of where Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny used to be, and a lot of decision making is happening at the Send Improvement Board. So if we look at point 12, the plan was approved by the Send Improvement Board in February 2024, and work is underway to deliver this plan. But of course, that's not come to children's services and that's not been reviewed. And I think you mentioned earlier on in the monitoring visit part that there's a plan and it's being measured against, but it's all happening with the DfE advisors, and they absolutely have their place, and their place is very important to ensure that we're on the right path. What we're not getting, I don't think, and I think there's a deficit between the overview, the scrutiny, and the accountability between the elected members and also what's out there in the forum, because public forum, because the Senate Improvement Board agendas and minutes are never published. And we refer quite a lot in a lot of our discussions. Well, yeah, we've got the FE advisor and he has said this or she has said that. And we've got an improvement board and a lot of work's going through there. But I'm just worried about how much of a presence it has within our work stream. But that same work stream isn't replicated or it's not scrutinised within this forum. I don't know what the question is. I hope you can work out what the question is from that. But I'd just be really interested to see how the two marry up and work collegiately on together.
You could ask the same question about the Children's Social Care Improvement Board, which you've not raised. But I guess it is the governance structure and assurance to the Secretary of State through the DfE advisor that we are managing the work that we should. It has a multitude of representatives that sit on that board in terms of council members, chief exec, 151 officer. So I'm not quite sure what the question is.
I think my question is, children's overview services are there to assist, but also to overview and to scrutinise, where a lot of the decision making is being made within the care process or the SEND board. The fact that actually it's not coming or we're not having sight of it either, and that's my concern. Whether that's
So my question is, I thought an update in terms of the work that's being done to be scrutinised was on the forward plan. I thought in terms of I thought there was a SEND, children's social care, SEND, children's social care. So my understanding, the scrutiny of that work would come here.
So if we use question number 12, point number 12 as an example, the plan was approved by the Senate Improvement Board in February 2024. Work's now underway to deliver this plan. And I welcome that really quick response and getting on with that piece of work. What I'm saying is that when we are scrutinising some of the work that's going on and have overview of some of the work that's going on, because we don't have sight of this plan, it's very hard to scrutinise effectively. And so we do get reassurances that, you know, an improvement board has said this or a Bedfordshire partner has said that. I really do welcome that, but it's very hard to scrutinise a plan that we've not yet seen to ensure that we're all on the right track. So Rachel, you want to come
in? I think when we met to do the forward plan, and we do always have a section on the overview and scrutiny for improvements, and it was agreed that we would theme those, hence the reason that we're feeding back through the MV visits. Following our discussion at the last forward planning meeting, we said we would bring the new plan to overview and scrutiny at either the next or the meeting. I can't remember which date it was, for you to scrutinise now the new plan is in place, because we always refresh at the beginning of the year, and then the new plan will take place from the 1st of April. It's just going through our governance process now, isn't it?
There's no reason why you can't see the plan.
And I'm not suggesting that. I think I'm just trying to work out how this committee work collegiately with the Senate Improvement Board, with the care boards as well, so that we're not seeing things too late down the line as well, because that sometimes isn't very helpful either. But it might be something the discussion we have with the rest of the committee offline as to how the two work sort of more closely together. But go on, sorry, go on. Yeah.
I think in terms of how the committee works with other bodies in the council, it's for the committee to drive its work plan and to be clear on what it would like to receive. It's a member-driven committee. You decide what you want. You have limited resources. You've got 5 meetings a year. So I'd suggest that this is something that you consider when you do your work planning.
I just say as well, I feel that we are a young committee. You know, we have got, I think, 70% new councillors. We have really focused on having committee meetings like this. Like I said earlier, we haven't got a subcommittee, we haven't got we could be saying, can one of us come and work with the Send Improve, so that we've got an eye into that. I feel like we probably need to broaden how we're meeting as well. So that would probably be a good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've answered the point that I was advised. Is there any other questions? Sorry, before I know we've attracted and Councillor Brown.
Really quickly, I'm just reading between the lines on the letter that came. It just kind of identifies, monitoring partners' commitment. I know we found that it's been hard to be joined up and stuff. Do you feel that I think you probably mentioned it regarding when we went below the line, just that there is more of a partnership now, especially with NHS and things like that. Is that kind of a bit moving on?
It's work in progress.
So we didn't have any recommendations out there. It was to know and to receive that update. So thank you very much for that. Just moving on really quickly then. So items for information, as always, because we have so much that comes through this committee and we never finish on time. It really is my fault. We have information for item for us to have a look. Again, I'd really welcome if anyone has any questions to email them back, and we can ask for officers, obviously, to present. I think it was mentioned to me about one of the items that came for information only, that I hadn't mentioned it at cabinet, but it's very hard to mention stuff at cabinet if I don't then obviously have that engagement. So it may be that sometimes you have nothing to say, and that's fine. But actually, if you do, then please, I really welcome those questions. We can get them added to the minutes. Portfolio holders update. Councillor Burton, just before we come to you, can I just remind you, please, that obviously we need to just steer away from the safety valve conversation, because there are some councillors here who don't have the dispensation, but obviously happy to hear about all the other stuff that you have to say to us.
Okay, Chair, can I just check them before I start? Because the first bit of the update is actually responding to a recommendation from a previous meeting about further engagement. I really wanted to do that because we're with the time frame. Now, I do mention the SV word, but there's no discussion over it because it's just my update, isn't it?
So just to be clear, the advice has come from the auditor officer that we shouldn't be having verbal updates regarding safety valve, and that verbal updates should be avoided in situations where urgency provisions are met. And therefore,
it's not an update at all about it, other than quoting a line from the letter that you've all received. It's just feeding back, because it was a recommendation from committee on the 3rd of January that about looking at further member engagement. And I just wanted to tidy that up.
So I think the situation is at the time that this agenda was prepared and published, the chair queried about adding a safety valve item update to the meeting, but there wasn't any update to provide at that time, so there isn't a specific item on the agenda. That's what the chair is referring to in that monitoring officer advice. In the last few days, some information has gone into the public domain, as far as I'm aware, around an update on the safety valve, and the portfolio holder was intending to update on this in his portfolio holder update. The chair is aware that some members have conflicts of interest that they have raised before around safety valve and don't have a dispensation to be able to participate in a discussion around this. So you're not comfortable.
Because it's really hard, simply because if you find that there is this conflict, you really are asked to literally leave the room. We're not even allowed to listen to the information, and it all comes under the code of conduct.
Asking Deputy Services whether this would be, I can email that part out, can't I, and add it to the meeting that way, because it could be a written response, couldn't it? Therefore, if I provide my first bit of my portfolio update as a written response to add to the minutes, would that
I'd really welcome that, and I would ask that perhaps, I know you've got an FAQ site online, that perhaps we can put it in there as well, because we don't really, so I'd like it in the minutes, but the minutes take so long to come out that if there is any public interest, they're not going to understand that in that information either.
The purely bit that I want to do is make sure that I've responded, because it is asked for a response from me, and yeah, within the time frame.
So yes, the portfolio holder can respond to the recommendations of the committee that he is referring to in writing. That is fine. In terms of any discussion on safety valve and the update tonight, that can be said in the public domain. The issue is that the chair and potentially others within the room may feel that they want to withdraw owing to interest or lack of dispensation. If the chair was to withdraw, we would need to elect another chair from amongst the people within the room. Yes, I just want the committee to be aware of their options in terms of that information being shared.
Should we have it by way of those? So, Councillor Canada.
Chair, I just think it's a complete nonsense that we get to the end of this meeting without discussing something which has been in the press. The letter has been in the press. There's been commentary in the press. The fact that we're being prevented from discussing it is completely balmy. I mean, the public are just going to make a laughing stock of this. Well, we're making ourselves a laughing stock, frankly, and to be precluded on the basis of very questionable, in my view, very questionable advice. I can't even. Apparently, from what you're saying, I can't even ask the portfolio holder to give me an update about what they're going to do about the stuff that's been in the press. It's nonsense.
I agree with you, and if you'd seen some of the emails that I've had to, and the hoops
I'm
I've had
a bit
to
uncomfortable about this conversation
Yeah.
going on in the public domain, discussing things.
I had a proposal, and the proposal is I'm willing to step down, and so that you can have, so just step down for this item so you can receive the safety valve update. Councillor Canavan can ask his question, but then I'm not conflicted, because the advice that I've had by email and on a number of occasions is quite clear. I'm really uncomfortable too, and I've been warned about the code of conduct, so I'm really uncomfortable remaining where I am. But if you're all happy, I'm happy to propose a chair to take over. You can all carry on, and I will hand over the chair for a temporary basis. So, Councillor Salmon.
Is the monitoring officer still here? Oh. This is worrying. That doesn't solve the problem for any of the rest of us who are finding ourselves in a difficult situation. So that's my problem.
I agree.
Yeah. I'm happy for it to be emailed. I think it's being taken too far.
So the suggestion from the floor is that we email it out. So I'm happy for the update on safety valve to be emailed out, and we hear the rest of the portfolio holders update thereafter. If that's okay, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Harman, and we all in agreement? No, Councillor Canavan is not. So, but that is a majority vote that's taken. Sorry, can we just? Sorry. Councillor Canavan, just confirm you were against.
Yes.
Yeah. So the long anticipated portfolio holder update, please, Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you. The good news is that therefore it will be shorter. And yeah, the second item, I do start with a bit of good news. The Supporting Families team has achieved a 91% payment by results performance against funded targets by the end of Q3. The national payment by results performance table has just been released, and we can see that our performance up to the end of Q3 equates to 16th out of 141 LEAs nationally. The national average is 61%. And second out of the 14 LAs regionally, the regional average is 70%. The team has also been identified as a trailblazing with the Southwest region by DLUC due to the IT and digital work that has been completed. During a recent cabinet debate, we were discussing meaningful consultation, and I was doing my normal bit about listening and hearing the voice of children and young people. The debate was about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, but the exact is not very important because, as always, I always just try to say we need to listen to young people and get their opinion when we have consultations, and we always miss that bit. So I was asking how we can engage children and young people in consultation, especially things that make a difference to them. I mention it now because although we've already had one of those of a working group or some work from this, it was very useful for this committee to come up with some suggestions how this could be improved. I was rather hoping that the young people were still here at this point, because I imagine that's the sort of thing that they would really like to get involved with. Just a couple of things on the Cabinet Forward Plan. The SEND programme of expansion of Campbell Heath Infant and Junior School is on Cabinet the 10th of April. I'm visiting there later this week to talk to the head. The Dedicated Schools Grant Management Plan update is on the 22nd of May, and there's other items on the forward plan that not yet have dates allocated. However, the next Children's O&S isn't until June, so some of you might want to come to Cabinet before your next meeting. Any members of this committee who want to attend to speak on children's issues or any other issue, of course, that's our Cabinet, they'll be very welcome. There's always opportunity for any members to speak before a debate, and so we'll look forward to see anybody who wanted to come.
Thank you. That was very short and sweet, wasn't it? Thank you. So forward work plan. So just trying to work out where I am. Sorry. Yeah, just to say that the full plan is your current full plan's Appendix B to the full plan report, and you have items already in place for your June meeting. So if there are any changes that you want to make to that, could be advised now, please. So just to be clear, it's quite youth-based, the crime-based, child exploitation within all of that. So looking at pathways. So that's the theme on the June one. Is everyone happy with that one? Yep. And as always, if you have any further suggestions, could I please ask you to email them over, and then we can ensure that they're popped into the forward work plan. So we're always looking for ideas as well. So check.
Thank you. Just two things, just for a bit of clarity for a newer member. We spoke earlier about early help and wanting to have a some sort of task and finish group, or I don't know, all the tools we have in our toolkit, which one would be best suited for this? Is that the sort of thing we would discuss now or outside of this meeting, just for clarity?
So I've picked up two suggestions throughout the course of this meeting for potential deeper dive work. So what I'd suggest that I do is, if I write to you and we start to get a bit of a scope together, then we would bring a more detailed suggestion and scope to the committee, and we can do some of that informally offline, get some advice from officers so that we have something more formal to sign up to. But I picked those up.
Right, and the other one was the other one I mentioned about the liaising with families.
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morency.
Thank you. When exactly will we be able to scrutinise the latest information we have on safety valve? I appreciate we can't do it now with all the legalities, but at what point can we do it? Because surely that's important.
And just to be clear, the committee can discuss it now, but there are reasons why you've decided that you don't want to, practical reasons. You can add anything to your agenda. You can add something to your next agenda if you wish to have a further discussion and update on it. Does the committee want to do that?
Or even, I would suggest a bit earlier, because
yeah,
Actually, June is so far away.
It is one of the things that I suggest with most committees now to try and make better use of your time is if there's something information based that it be shared offline, maybe in a briefing. Shall we look to arrange something along those lines for the committee?
What, on safety valve?
Something informal to impart current information to you.
Would we be able to scrutinise it though?
You can have informal discussions offline so that you are receiving information. That's a good environment in which to receive information. If you want to have a scrutiny session on something, that should be done in committee or a working group. But sometimes there's an element of informing you so that you're able to have the most effective scrutiny session. So it is okay to receive some information offline if you want to have something earlier.
So would it be possible to have information offline followed by scrutiny?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, I think this.
Would the committee like to arrange an informal briefing on that topic with a view to then determining whether that goes on its next agenda, future agenda?
And
yeah. Is there consensus around that in the room?
I'm going to abstain, and the reason is because there's been so many allegations in the background about myths and political machinations, etc., that I think anything that isn't in the public domain on safety valve will be viewed cynically. B, I think there is a high public interest in this. And C, also, I am just really concerned about how narratives are being really spun. At least, you know, everything that has been discussed on safety valve so far has been in the public, and the public being able to see what the true myths are and actually what was said. So I personally am not in favour of an informal briefing that isn't then recorded or shared or is a closed session in some way. But I understand that so far that there is a consensus, and I'm happy to go with that, but I will abstain for that reason.
Chair, just to be clear, I'm obviously not able to make a move or any proposal like that. So that's not what has happened.
No.
I'm just suggesting a course of direction to you. If someone would like to then make a move on how you would like to propose with a safety valve item, I've given you some options, and then you may wish to vote on it.
Would it be possible to actually have some information given to us and we have a date for scrutiny? So essentially, it's just like here we've got information in advance, which we now scrutinise. Is that doable? So then it kind of covers all.
Can I just say that's yeah. You've had a letter, an email with all the information that is available at this moment in time, and that is where we're at right now. There may well be some more discussions to come forward. That's why, and I haven't given the bit of a report saying that choosing the right time is really important, because having a discussion about something when there's nothing else to discuss, there will be more things to discuss, but you need to be at the point when those things are there that we can discuss. If you see, if I'm talking in riddles now, but
no, I do know what you mean. Although certainly having read the letter, there are things on there I would like to scrutinise. So maybe we should just go straight to scrutiny.
Do you like me to come back in? So either you can make that as a proposal for this. Yes. If the other option, just to be aware, is that we can consult with you informally on the next step around this and come to a view offline on how we go forward.
I mean, I'm not clear why we need to do that. the motion that I proposed at the last council meeting was absolutely clear about this. So although the letter that we've now seen and that's been in the press says that we're still awaiting the capital element of safety valve, and that's obviously one of the things that Councillor Byrne just referred to.
I feel like we're going into we're not supposed to be discussing this.
Well, you know, I'm not taking any lessons from the administration on this. I'm here to challenge the decisions that are being made, and that's what I intend to do.
I understand that, but we've been advised that this isn't something that should be being discussed at the moment. So I don't know if we then need to just.
We can discuss it. I would just recuse myself at this point and just feel like this. I've never known a children's services meeting like this one before. Okay, I think on this matter, if it's okay, I think there are some concerns that need to be addressed. We need to understand the mechanism that we can do that, the forum that all members, not just this committee, but actually all members are comfortable with. I'm really happy if that's okay with, I think, obviously, portfolio holder yourself, and yeah, take this offline to decide when, where, how. Obviously, the letter will bring things forward, and there will be some areas that need to be scrutinised around that, and understanding the next plan, next steps, and what the plans and the outline for that. And maybe if we just take that offline, if everyone is happy, I'm happy to propose that, and then but make sure that members of this committee certainly have all of their voices heard, so that we. So effectively, we are the ones that are representing families out there, aren't we? Is everyone happy with that? If I propose it, I would need a seconder, please. So, Councillor Brown, is that you seconding?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So all those in favour at the moment, and then those against. Councillor Canavan has been recorded as against. Councillor Martin was up for.
Yeah, so that is carried. We will take those discussions offline and agree a way forward.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I'm really sorry it's a very late meeting. I did have times written by my agenda, just didn't do very well. But we're going to close the meeting at 21:03. Our future meeting date is June.
They're on the agenda, just to note that they are there.
Thank you very much. Good night.